Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, Thursday, June 5th. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. We're going to continue our kind of deep dive series. We're going to be looking at the most interesting part of the ADP when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings this time around. If you want to check out some of our other episodes, we unpacked Jameson Williams and the Lions last Thursday, and we also did Luther Burden and the Bears a couple weeks back. So go ahead, check the backlogs if you haven't caught up on that. But today we are going to be diving into the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to start things out with their backfield. Aaron Jones obviously getting some competition now with Jordan Mason in the fold. But before then, we actually got a little bit of news. This time of year, we don't always get treated to a ton of big ticket items. But today, as of this morning, the Ravens went ahead and extended Rashod Bateman. I believe it's like a 3-year extension per Adam Schefter. So he now settles in, I think, as the wide receiver 28 as far as the pay scale is concerned. Last summer, he was going into, I think, what would have been like a time where the Ravens had to make a call on his 5th-year option. They signed him to like a 2-year extension that was kind of a prove-it deal. And last year, for the most part, I would say that he proved it. Had a career year, 45 catches for 756 yards and 9 touchdowns on 72 targets. That's good for 10.5 yards per target. So he wasn't the main focal point of the offense. Just 15.7% was his target share, but did a decent amount of damage. Obviously, was a big player in the playoff game against the Bills as well. So your thoughts here, Mario, on the Ravens kind of locking in their relationship with one Rashod Bateman for the next few years?
I think it's a decent contract. Rashod Bateman is not going to change the complexion of the offense by being there, of course, but a player like him who was quietly productive last year, even in a peripheral, even in like a role player kind of role, it's like you can't take those numbers for granted and just sort of invite a question mark in its place, especially just to kind of pinch pennies over it. So I've seen a kind of range of what I would call confused takes about this signing and Rashod Bateman in general. It's a cheap contract. It's cheap even if it's a full $12 million per year for a full 3 years, but it's probably going to turn out to be more like a 2-year, $20 million kind of deal. The guaranteed money figures that you see in news at the initial scoop announcement, you can't trust. There's a lot of like roster bonuses and workout bonuses in there that isn't truly guaranteed money. So and the convention is if you don't get like void years at the end of the contracts nowadays, you tend to have a year or two that is basically by design supposed to get terminated, either renegotiating at that point or cutting. And so that last year probably won't happen. Either Bateman will probably get cut at that point or do well enough that he gets another extension before that 3rd year. And in the meantime, I would characterize Bateman as an above baseline target for the Ravens last year. Like you said, it was only 15.8 target share percentage, but I would say even with the catch rate below the team baseline by nearly 7 points, 62.5 is it's lower than the 69.6 on the team, but the 10.5 yards per target is way higher than the 9.2 yards per target that the rest of the team has. And there's also there's a bit of there's a hint in that touchdown rate, right? Like 9 touchdown catches on 45 receptions, 9 touchdowns on 72 targets. That is something that I personally would factor into the baseline calculation, maybe not the catch rate, but at the very least yards per target. So this was a guy who was a 15.8% target share, which is something like your wide receiver 3, your 3rd pass catcher, whatever nowadays. And he was above the team baseline on a team that had an extremely high baseline because of Lamar Jackson's passing stats last year. So that's a player. Maybe he can't get to the wide receiver 2, the second pass catcher, distinction. Maybe he can't push for 20% or even 18% target share. But I actually think that Bateman's production last year indicates that he could push towards something like 18% if they needed him to. And especially as much as it would be bad if the Ravens were to miss Zay Flowers for any number of games. If Flowers were to miss time, I actually think Bateman's numbers start improving, like the efficiency starts improving, because as good as Bateman was last year as a sort of the de facto lead boundary receiver in this offense, he's still not even best suited for those kinds of tasks. He's better at more running in the range that Flowers does, but the Ravens will probably continue to prioritize Flowers there, understandably enough.
Right. So Flowers is a guy who, gets like a quarter or so of the target share. So like you said, we're not looking at like a massive jump as far as the target share is concerned. But, the production that Bateman posted last year, I think some people might reflexively point to the fact that, he was scoring a touchdown on every 8 targets and be like, oh, well, that's not sustainable. And that's probably true. But I think that, the targets could go up at least a little bit, where we're looking at 80 to 90 targets potentially for him. Obviously, there's some money here that's being thrown Bateman's way, and I think that for as disappointing as his first 3 seasons in the league were, rookie year kind of derailed by a groin issue. I think that was back in training camp, and then he looked like he was about to break out in year 2. Had that foot injury, was obviously hampered by it in 2023, which is why there was kind of like that prove it deal last year. And again, I felt like he proved it. So I think that there's still room for him to grow as a player. This is entering his age 25 season. So again, it's almost like you can be a little bit agnostic of Bateman, the player, because, we are talking about a guy who's going to be routinely getting targets in one of the most efficient and high scoring offenses in the NFL. So I feel like for fantasy purposes, where he goes, for the year that he had last year, the ADP didn't really jump up that much this year, just like a couple of rounds. He was like somewhere in like the 150s, I want to say, last year. Now he's just inside the top 115, sort of a receiver dead zone, as it were. Looks like. So really, Rashid Shaheed's the only receiver that's going within 5 picks or so of him, and then you're dipping into guys like Kyle Williams and Marvin Mims. So if you are shopping for a receiver in that range, are you clicking Bateman more often than some of those other guys, or what's your read there?
I guess in that range, I'm probably most likely to take Marvin Mims just because I'm a major Marvin Mims truther. But if I have Lamar Jackson from earlier in the draft, I'll take Bateman almost for sure in that case. And even if I don't have Lamar, I'm not going to avoid Bateman at that price. If I don't take Bateman there, it's probably because I'm not taking a receiver there, or because I'm taking Mims and I'm hoping still to get Bateman at the next pick. Maybe I don't, maybe I do. But I think that's a quality, I don't know what kind of exposure percentage to suggest, but I think because Bateman is pretty cheap at that price, I think you can make him like a staple best, especially on Underdog, a staple best ball pick, because the half point PPR is to Bateman's benefit. Like, he didn't have many catches last year, granted, but 9 touchdowns will pay in a system where a lot of other receivers are finishing with like 5 or 6, and like if they have 25 more catches, who cares?
No, exactly. So touchdowns are king, especially on Underdog. So if you're even kind of conservative with the catch projection, like say catches 50 passes this year, I think the touchdown upside that he brings is pretty significant. Also scored, I believe, in both of the playoff games. Of course, Zay Flowers was missing for those, but I think that overall we might see the offense kind of funnel a little bit more towards the wide receivers this year, a little bit away from Mark Andrews, just a touch. Not to say that Andrews is going to fall off a cliff or anything, but it wouldn't surprise me if Bateman's usage ticks up just a little bit here.
Maybe. I don't think that they're specifically making it a goal, though. I think they're content to have a little redundancy, some people might call it, but what redundancy also is durability. And like our society is so like efficiency fetishized at this point. People can't people can't think through the very obvious ways durability might pay off, but if it needs a specific example, look at Mark Andrews' injury history. It's like, if I think they're like, yeah, we hope we can get 15 touchdowns to Mark Andrews, but if we can't, we have Likely and we have Bateman, and we're glad that we do.
Exactly. So all in all, I think Bateman is, a reasonable selection. Again, it's a funky part of the ADP when it comes to receivers, but I'm pretty inclined to click on him again, especially.
Like John, the entire category of late round starting receiver in an offense projected to be among the highest scoring is like Bateman has to be unique in that part of the ADP from that one category distinction.
No, he is. I mean, like I said, that depending on the rosiness of your outlook for the Broncos this year, Kyle Williams.
Not very. Yeah.
Like Kyle Williams.
Kyle's interesting, but I don't have any faith that he'll get 5 touchdowns, let alone 8 or 9.
And I have plenty of faith that Bateman can do that, actually. So therefore, that sort of wins the tiebreaker. And in Rashid Shaheed's case, I love Rashid Shaheed, but coming off the injury and Tyler
long
Shough,
injury history.
Tyler Shough, yeah. So I think I'm more attuned to grab a guy who's in an offense that we can bank on scoring a lot of points. Before we get on to the Vikings, we do have a listener question from our guy Ryan. Would you send a 2027, so a couple of years from now, first rounder for Jonathan Taylor or Devin Achane? He's in a win now type of setup.
That's almost like a charity offer by the other person, especially if you're in a win now mode, because like generally you want to, what is it, depreciation? You want to call a draft pick that's 1 year from now about a round or more later than it actually is. So a first rounder this year should probably be a first rounder next year should be considered about as worth as much as like at least the first half of the second round this year. So 2026, that's basically like a second rounder you're paying to get JT or Achane, and in another year it doesn't work quite so neatly that it's a third round cost that you're paying. But for the deferred payment to be 2 years away and to get a guy that could be a running back 1 in any given year, do it.
Yeah, I think so as well. So yeah, I would do that even for 2026. I think if you're in win now, and you have a backfield that can really kind of bully the rest of the league. You already got Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs,
but don't have a crappy team. Do the win now part also. Don't let them get a great pick at that point. Make them regret making the trade.
Just win now, baby. All right, before we get on over to the Vikings, we got a quick message from our pals over at Circa. The ultimate fantasy football experience giveaway can only take place in Las Vegas. Circa Resort and Casino wants to bring your 12-team league to draft in Vegas and be treated like VIPs during their stay. One winning league will receive a 2-night stay at Circa Resort, a poolside cabana for your fantasy football draft, limo transportation to and from the airport, and more. So be sure to check that out over at Circa, the ultimate fantasy football experience giveaway. All right, on to the main topic here, Mario. So we're going to be diving in on the Vikings, and I felt like, unlike in the case of the Bears or the Lions, where we wanted to go receiver heavy to kind of do our magnifying glass, wanted to look at the backfield for the Vikings, because that to me is a little bit uncertain. We already kind of know how good Justin Jefferson is. Obviously, top 5 pick, routinely usually top 3, even in best ball formats. You got Jordan Addison on his way up. You got TJ Hockenson. We'll get to all those guys, but Aaron Jones, I think, was one of the steals of the draft last year. I think that going into a new team, not being someone that was routinely scoring a ton of touchdowns in Green Bay, some bumps and bruises along the way, turns in his highest workload of his career in the NFL, 255 carries, 51 catches on top of that. And, just was really impressive. Did not have like the amazing touchdown production necessarily. let's see. I think so. I'm sorry. Fewest rushing touchdowns among running backs with at least 250 carries. He was tied with Tony Pollard. And now you talk about him entering his age 30 season, coming off the big workload, and they bring in a guy like Jordan Mason. So your thoughts on how this backfield is going to shape up, and what your level of interest is on both Jones and Mason at their respective ADPs, where Jones kind of ended the seventh at 82, and Jordan Mason at pick 100.
Well, Aaron Jones for a long time has been one of my favorite players in the league, and he was obviously a really great player at UTEP. Even when the Packers selected Jamal Williams before Jones, I think most college football heads like us were like, no, Jones is better. And he had a really great run for a while there with the Packers, had a good year last year, even with the Vikings. But I pretty much want not much to do with him at his current ADP. I need Jones's ADP, which as of a couple of days ago when I looked, I wanted to say was it like 82nd or 83rd or something like that. So I guess we'd be saying the late 7th round,
Yes.
generally, if that's correct. Which that's fine. I'm not suggesting like Aaron Jones is a landmine at that price. It's just, I guess I'm greedy enough to feel like I can find something better in that range. And I guess one thing I remember too is someone like Jalen Warren, who I would otherwise consider a similar category of fantasy asset this year as Aaron Jones. Jalen Warren on Underdog, I believe, goes something like a round and a half later than Aaron Jones. So when what I would call a disparity like that exists, I'm probably just not picking Jones, at least not until Warren's price goes up or Jones's price goes down or Mason's price goes up. Mason, I also have to go off the top of my head with this, but it was like 10th round that is it 130?
He's pick 100.
Oh, he's 100. Okay, so that's a little higher than I assumed, but I like it because I think Jones is good, but I also think Jordan Mason is good, and I think the two complement each other in an obvious enough way. I mean, the Vikings have already said, yeah, we see Mason as more of like a power grinder, maybe a short yardage guy, and that's doesn't change a whole lot for Jones, honestly, because like you said, those 5 touchdowns on 255 carries, I don't think, I guess it could happen, but I don't think that if we rerun that scenario with Jordan Mason, that Jones gets like 1 touchdown. I think he probably just gets 4 or 5 again. Just probably has to do it mostly from 10, 8, 15 yards out. And it is hard to score 10 touchdowns when you have to go that far on average. It's a lot easier when you're getting the goal line carries like he did in that 16 touchdown 2019 season with the Packers. So I think if Mason's healthy, that scenario is pretty much precluded on the one hand. And so I find at that price, Aaron Jones is a little expensive, but on the other, if you only need Jones to be what he was last year, maybe the carry count comes down a little. Maybe they try to keep him more like 220 or something than 255 over 17 games, especially now that he's Jones is going to turn 31 in December. So
yeah,
he does have the risk of falling off that cliff. I don't think he really showed it last year, but I guess to sum it up, my concerns at the ADP are not just Mason, but it's the age detail. And I think if Jones loses like any step at all, it could come at a high cost because he doesn't really have another hand. Like, he doesn't have like another move. If he's not elusive, I'm not sure what he has at that point, and he has to stop fumbling so much. I think if Jones fumbles at a rate like last year, it's a good way to just kind of not get the ball in the second half of a game.
Yeah, so I have some concerns. I think that unfortunately, like that last year was probably the last like really, really good fantasy year from Aaron Jones. At least that's my concern right now when we're looking at considering drafting him late in the 7th round. Again, this is a Vikings offense last year that only he basically had the monopoly on the backfield. Like only 120 or so carries went to the other backs in that backfield. So I think the addition of Mason, is going to push that number up, and I think it's going to come directly at the carry volume cost for Jones. So that sets up the dynamic, like you were saying, where we're not going to see Jones getting like the red zone work because you have an obvious guy in Jordan Mason who weighs over 220 pounds coming in there, but obviously like a much better short yardage option. Beyond that, like when it comes to Mason, I don't know. There aren't many running backs that have actually been more efficient since Mason debuted in 2022. Like it averaged at least 5.2 yards per carry. Coming off of his career high in carries last year, obviously with Christian McCaffrey being sidelined. I will kind of posit the question to you though. Not to say that Mason's a system guy, because he had great numbers at Georgia Tech. Like I think that he can get his yards almost no matter what. But how much do you think it was sort of like tailwinds, like aided by the fact that the 49ers offense just so elite at scheming up the run? And do you worry at all about the efficiency coming down just a bit now that he's in Minnesota?
It's a valid concern. I guess you can recall Matt Breida had some explosive numbers at one point, and then he sort of just disappeared forever. But I think in Mason's case, I'm encouraged by, I don't know, pretty much everything, actually. I mean, it's encouraging to me that he was over 5 yards a carry each of the last 3 years. There's two very small samples, 40 carries in the first two seasons. But it's encouraging to me when a guy doesn't fluctuate that much, but still shows overall very explosive numbers. Like sometimes these players who average 5 yards a carry over a year, they might go a week or two where they don't have the big plays producing the big plays that like make the average look good. Maybe they don't happen because the sample's too small. But even in small samples, it's like Mason just raked. He never did anything but rake every time over 3 years that the 49ers gave him the ball. The second thing is he performed at a high standard, even by the standards of the 49ers, right? Like it wasn't like going Terrell Davis to Alandis Gary or something. It was like the bar stayed the same as a runner. As a pass catcher, Mason might not have much to offer. I don't know how to get a read on that. He didn't catch passes at Georgia Tech, and he hasn't done it in the NFL. There's a slight chance that it's only for reasons outside of his control. In the case of Georgia Tech, it's like they had, well, I guess they didn't at the end. I can't remember what happened at the end of his career, but Mason was on track to be like a big time college football running back until Jahmyr Gibbs showed up. Kind of screwed everything up for him. And then with the 49ers, it's like, yeah, Mason's not going to get passing down work if McCaffrey's there. So they might not have really trained him up on those kinds of sub-package play calling kind of considerations. So I don't know if there's a scenario, like if Aaron Jones misses time, I don't know if that means in that case that Mason might catch 3 or 4 passes in a game. I guess I kind of assume he wouldn't. There's a chance, but it's total leap of faith to think he'd be good there. So the main concern with Mason as a fantasy asset, in my opinion, is not so much the risk that he turns out to be like a fraud as a power runner, as like a big play power runner. It's more that maybe he's not enough of a pass catching threat to certainly in redraft, I would worry a little bit more. Like in redraft, I worry about starting Mason on the wrong weeks, benching him on the wrong weeks, because he's going to be probably like rushing touchdown dependent on the Vikings having good enough game scripts to run the ball a lot and get carries to both him and Jones. Because if they're going hurry up, if they're playing catch up, there's a chance that Jones just kind of plays the rest of the game. But I'm not worried about Mason getting 20 carries and finishing with 70 yards. I'm thinking that's something he's just good at. And like I said, if Jahmyr Gibbs hadn't shown up to Georgia Tech, Jordan Mason might have come into the league as just an assumed standout runner. People would have just had part of the pushback with a guy like him who has no draft pedigree is people do the draft capital thing where it's like, oh well, he has bad draft capital, so he's probably a fraud. And it's like, no, draft capital doesn't mean anything like that in a slam dunk sense. All it really indicates is that the team's commitment to you as an asset, as a prospect. And Mason came into the league, went to the 49ers with nothing going for him at all. And, he did really well with every opportunity, and he did really well with the Georgia Tech opportunities before Jahmyr Gibbs showed up. So if Jahmyr Gibbs never shows up to Georgia Tech and Mason produces the way that he has in the NFL to this point, people would more so be thinking of him as like a Michael Turner type. And if you remember him, he kind of puzzlingly was on the bench for a few years with the Chargers or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, behind LT.
Yeah, and he never caught a pass, or at least I don't really remember it a whole lot. He went nuts on a run heavy offense, but it's like you can imagine, in my opinion, you can imagine Mason getting to the second team and not having quite the Turner was insane,
Yes.
but Mason could be quite good himself because like he, as much as he has no draft pedigree, as much as people might feel like he came out of nowhere, he didn't. He's always been very productive. It has never been true otherwise. Like it's just always been there with him every
And
chance.
you know who did have draft pedigree? I think from the same draft class, Trey Sermon.
Yeah, I guess that's it's actually a good thing for Mason that he's undrafted as a 49ers back, because otherwise he would have gotten like the Joe Williams, Trey Sermon, what was the other one that Tyrion Davis Price, that kind of stuff. Yeah, like as the people who told you don't pick Tyrion Davis Price, you should also be able to take our word for it when we say Jordan Mason is not like those kinds of guys.
No, he's good, and we have enough sample. I think that we really encouraging run for him. Kind of being the starter while McCaffrey was out last year, and I like his fit in Minnesota. I think that they needed to bulk up that backfield, especially because, drum roll, the offense is going to look a lot different this year. Or correct me if I'm wrong, but
I don't
we
know
have.
how it will certainly look different, like JJ McCarthy's something new. I just can't personally envision the specifics, and I can't tell if the specifics are going to if it's subject to like aesthetic things, like Sam Darnold does this quirky thing and we had to build around it last year to accommodate him. Like maybe JJ McCarthy has his own quirks that they have to accommodate, but in terms of playing average quarterback, which is even last year, I think Darnold was clearly no better than average. I am pretty optimistic McCarthy can do that.
Okay. All right. So let's get into that a little bit further. So I looked into the pass play rates and the plays per game. Minnesota was very balanced last year. Like I think they were like 18th in pass play percentage, and
they were run heavy to hide Darnold in large part.
Yeah, so there's that involved. I think as far as their plays per game, they were like smack dab kind of in the middle of the league. But I just wonder, and I want to get your thoughts more on the move from Darnold to McCarthy. Like, I think it's important to give people a quick rebrushing up on who McCarthy is and who he was as a prospect, because I looked back into his game logs from college. There are only 6 times where he was asked to throw it more than 30 times in a game. Played
right.
I'll give him like 30-ish starts, maybe like 33, something like that, and was kind of behind Cade McNamara his freshman season at Michigan before officially taking the reins. But Michigan famously just kind of pounded the rock. They didn't ask McCarthy to do a lot, and that's why he was such like a polarizing kind of a mystery box type of prospect coming out, because it's like, okay, like when they did ask him to do stuff, he was pretty good, but does that necessarily scale up?
It's a projection, I'm sure someone out there boldly made the exact right call on whatever McCarthy's going to turn out to be. So there's somebody who posted on Twitter like 2 years ago, is like, JJ McCarthy is going to be exactly like this or that, and here's how I know it, and like they're going to be right. But that person is probably the kind of person who's willing to have extreme opinions often, and isn't afraid of getting burned for it. I think anyone who's tried to follow NFL quarterback prospects over however many number of years at this point has been subject to enough surprises and kind of like humbling outcomes that they should not feel completely safe calling McCarthy good or bad. Like they should more so say something like, I wish I had more information. I just don't have enough information to make the call right now. And again, somebody's still going to be right. Somebody's going to nail it, but I don't feel like I can tell anybody straight up that McCarthy will be good or bad. I can say concretely that I am optimistic, because limited as it is, the information we have to this point is all positives. I mean, I guess if you wanted to nitpick, it's like you can definitely find some box scores over his 2 starting seasons where, well, this game was kind of ugly and this one wasn't that great, but the small sample size detail defends him in that case, because it's like,
Sure.
I suppose it's not great that he completed like 7 of 16 passes against Rutgers or whatever, but if he had to throw 10 more, for all we know, he could have completed 8 of them, and then it's just like, oh, never mind. So it's a complete wild card kind of dynamic, in my opinion, but I still lean toward the optimism side, because McCarthy did pretty much lock down whatever it was he was supposed to do, and Michigan did dominate. It's like they had some points where McCarthy could have failed them and he didn't. So I can't put a negative in his profile. Like, I bet he would have sucked though if he played more. I can't really think about it that way. For fantasy purposes, it's definitely worth noting McCarthy can run. I don't know how much he's going to do it in the NFL. There's definitely other examples of quarterbacks who could have ran more and chose not to in the NFL for whatever reason. McCarthy might or might not try to be a so-called pocket passer more than like a pocket breaking quarterback. But I think McCarthy could be, rather, I should say, I expect him to run for at least 300 yards per year in the NFL, and maybe push for like 500, maybe like a helpful touchdown count if the Vikings are scoring a lot of points that year. But as a passer, that part, I just don't know what to make of the volume detail, especially. I think we can say McCarthy at the very least can be a game manager, kind of like Darnold was last year. They tried to hide Darnold, and it was that they were successful in doing so was the reason Darnold had a career year, even with the warts that especially piled up at the end. And in that role, I personally feel pretty comfortable with McCarthy. I just can't tell if there's a realistic way he's an upgrade over Darnold, but worse than Darnold, that would shock me, actually.
Do you think that they, in the Jordan Mason signing ends up being a bit of a signal to this, that they do try to kind of protect him a little bit, that in what is his de facto rookie season, obviously first year as a starter coming off of the knee injury and everything, where you bring in Mason behind Aaron Jones and you're like, okay, we're going to bump up that run rate a little bit, or is there just like too much other determining factors within this Vikings offense, KOC being, more of a pass oriented type of offensive coach. And then the fact that, you have glaring guys who need to get the ball and need to be kept happy, like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hockenson, to the point where it's like they keep the run pass split pretty much the same as it was a year ago.
Well, I think the Vikings, I think Kevin O'Connell would like to make McCarthy a scaled up passer. I think if they felt comfortable with him throwing the ball, pushing the ball downfield, whatever, I think they would like to indulge that. But I also think they're probably going to go in somewhat cautiously to the regular season. Like there's what is it? They're opening against the Bears, is that right? So if the Vikings have to go to Chicago in week 1, then that might be a game where maybe you don't go air raid. Maybe you try to put that game more on Mason and Jones and try to hide McCarthy a little bit. Try to take extra measures to make sure as high of a percentage of his pass attempt volume that does occur as possible goes to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hockenson and Addison or whatever. Like try to really dial up the shots you do take for him. And I think you do need to commit to a run heavy game plan to set up that kind of what they should really be trying to do. They should be trying to make it similar to what Brock Purdy had with like the loaded 49ers, where it's running the ball a lot. And when you take your shots, try to get that defense spread thin in the coverage so you can really get some big plays, that high yards per attempt, the high touchdown rate, which also is not totally dissimilar than the way he was used at Michigan. So I guess the best that I can answer the question is I'm not concerned about McCarthy being hidden in any actionable way, especially relative to the standards that Darnold had last year. If it was a Kirk Cousins offense last year and Kirk Cousins stayed healthy and everything like that, that Vikings offense would probably have looked different than this one with McCarthy or even the one with Darnold last year. Like O'Connell clearly decided as a matter of like utmost strategic importance, they needed to throw the ball less with Darnold than they did with Cousins. And I guess O'Connell could reach a similar conclusion relative to Darnold. Maybe he could say like, we have to throw it even less with McCarthy, but that would surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that's been in the building for over a year now, and I think it is going to be ready to go. I'm just going to be a little bit cautious, and I think going further or just kind of zooming out as far as the ADP market is concerned for quarterbacks. There's just too many other proven guys that I'm more confident in taking for fantasy purposes this year. So McCarthy. Pick 136 right now, just 2 picks behind the likes of CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence. So
yeah,
I'm just probably not going to be ending up with a lot of McCarthy.
I can't recall whether I have any underdog shares to this point. Part of why I might not is that I don't think it's at all necessary to pair him to pair Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison or Hockenson or whoever with McCarthy. I'd imagine a lot of the people driving his ADP specifically are doing that, though. Like the people who take Jefferson in round 1 are like, oh, I got to take McCarthy now. I don't see it that way. I think it could work out, but for McCarthy to be so necessary as a pairing interest, I think at the very least, yeah, like you said, there need to be fewer ADP alternatives nearby, and Trevor Lawrence in particular. I love Stroud. I'm open to the idea that Stroud's like the better real life quarterback than him and Lawrence, but for fantasy, I'm just pretty. This might be wrong. I could just be stupidly confident, but I am pretty confident that the Jaguars' defense is not going to be very good, and that they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So, and crucially, no press Taylor, Doug Peterson, or Urban Meyer. So I don't even care what's behind that fourth door. If Cohen turns out to be just average, I think it still constitutes a huge upgrade. But in the case of McCarthy, I'm not even remotely convinced that he has the volume, the usage volume that Lawrence does. So I might not get. I don't know. I might try a weird draft or two where I go just absurdly cheap at quarterback, but I guess that's the only other way I can see myself picking McCarthy at the moment in best ball. And in redraft, I don't know. It's like half the leagues like you barely even need a backup quarterback. Like there's a McCarthy on the waivers anyway, and I don't want to have. Safe to say, I don't want to have to guess correctly before each Viking game this year whether it'll be one of McCarthy's good or bad days. Like I just don't think it'll be predictable.
No, it's definitely, you're going into the void. So therefore, probably the quote better in best ball when it comes to McCarthy. But again, as it stands, some stronger alternatives at the quarterback position right now where he's going. Let's take a look at the larger landscape of this Vikings offense when it comes to the ADP. So again, obviously, Justin Jefferson, the first of these Vikings that comes off the board, is ADP just over pick number 3 overall. Jordan Addison goes at the beginning of the 6th round, pick 61. Aaron Jones, like we talked about, pick end of the 7th. TJ Hockenson goes right after Aaron Jones. Jordan Mason, pick 100. JJ McCarthy, pick 136. So with each of these guys, starting with Jefferson, it's a more high pressure, question when it's a guy that you're spending your first pick on and someone that, you need this guy to work out because you're not going to be picking again for 20 to 22 more selections. So in Justin Jefferson's case, have you taken the plunge much, and are you inclined to?
I don't think I have a ton of Jefferson shares to this point, but that's only because of where my draft slotting has been. I can't remember. Is it like 3 or 4 or 5 he must go? So I'm probably not taking Jefferson over. In most cases, I'm probably not taking Jefferson over Bijan or Gibbs. I don't know what to make of Barkley exactly. I've luckily not had to decide because he usually is gone by the point that I'm talking about anyway. But I have some anxiety about him that I don't with the other two running backs. Maybe that's
I think
stupid.
people are starting to freak out about Barkley. Like it's almost become mainstream to be worried about Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for me the workload thing so specifically. I mean, it's not ideal. It is a big workload that he's taken, and he's had plenty of injuries in his NFL career. Certainly, it's more just that he was so insanely good last year. It's just unfair to expect him to do that again. And granted, you could say like, well, if he did it again, he'd be worth like the -5th pick, let alone the first or the second. It's like, yeah, fair enough. But I just think so, John. The way you foresaw like Jamar Chase being wide receiver 1 last year.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my dog was batting at her face. You were basically observing just the general nature of regression and how like, well, this guy seems like a guy who at some point in his NFL career will finish as the wide receiver 1, and it hasn't happened yet. Why not this year? Simple as that. And I think with Barkley, it's like you can similarly say like, yeah, he had his whatever second or third time finishing as the running back 1. He might get his 4th, but it probably won't be right away. Stuff like that. So I'm pretty agnostic on all of that top 5. And in some drafts, I feel like I've remembered seeing Jefferson go as high as 2 after Chase goes first. I probably don't want to make that pick, but if I'm at 5, if it's not too greedy to ask that Jefferson falls to 5, I definitely would like to take him there. And I can't go into this year with no Jefferson exposure. So at some point, I'm going to have to just accept the price, whatever it is.
I think just mainly if I'm picking in the top 3 and Chase and Saquon are off the board, I am going to be more in the Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson market. More so Gibbs. It's definitely still like Bijan plenty, but I feel like in Jefferson's case, I don't see like you could argue that with McCarthy being in his first year, like who's he going to go to? Like you could be concerned about McCarthy's ability to support multiple fantasy assets at their respective ADPs, but Justin Jefferson is always going to get his. He's always going to be McCarthy's always going to be looking towards Jefferson. That ends up being true, but maybe I don't know, an underdog scoring format where I'm a little bit more pessimistic about the touchdown upside with Jefferson in year 1 with McCarthy. Like I'm just probably going elsewhere. I'm having trouble with these first round receivers generally when it comes to like 2 through 5, really. Like so you get Jefferson, you get CeeDee Lamb, who's someone who I like a ton. But last year I was like, if you're drafting him expecting him to do exactly what he did in 2023. I'm skeptical that he's going to be able to repeat that. Now he came close enough to where he's a top 5 pick once again, but a little bit leery there. And the Puka Nacua, you got Devontae Adams coming into town. So like you can't really play this game where you're jumping market so much in the first round, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of, if not both, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas end up outperforming Justin Jefferson this year. I don't know if that's a scorcher or not.
I don't think it's a scorcher. I definitely think, though, that the ADP will make more room in the top 10 for Neighbors and Thomas. You see either one, and especially Neighbors, sometimes go in that range. I feel like you sometimes see Neighbors go something like 6th overall on Underdog. But it is, as much as I don't project those guys to be as good as, let alone better than Jefferson or Lamb. I'm actually quite high on Lamb this year. I do think those guys, Neighbors and Thomas, and even Lamb. So if we think of Jefferson as 5, Lamb is 6 or 7 or whatever, and then Neighbors and Thomas back at like 10 or 11 or wherever they tend to slot. Lamb, Neighbors, and Thomas at their respective cheaper prices are all reasons why I'm not necessarily taking Jefferson at 5. Normally, if I'm ranking him 5th, it's normally like a kind of slam dunk thing. It's like, okay, if Gibbs and Bijan and Chase are gone, I'm taking Jefferson. But I view those guys as pretty similar, and the price is cheap enough with Neighbors and Thomas that I think ideally especially if you're in a third round reversal kind of scenario. I'd rather get those guys at 10 than most receivers at 5. Or sorry, almost any receiver, I should say, in the first round at 5. It's just Chase that's in his own tier, and then Lamb and Jefferson, I think, are the second, but they aren't as far away from the third tier as they are the first.
Right. So that there is a bit of a gap there that needs to be minded. Of course. So yeah, I think really when it comes to drafting Jefferson this year, like I'm going to be needing to be picking like 6th or 7th and have him fall to me.
That is easy at that point. I'll say that's if we can be greedy, that would be pretty cool setup.
I could see it. I could see, some, amount of helium jumping up and a top 5 ending up not including Jefferson. And therefore, he's available to me. Like I am taking Jefferson over Puka Nacua.
Yeah.
But I think that, there is like another teardrop there, like you mentioned. And yeah, I'm definitely like, I'd be happier picking 10th and getting Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas than I would be picking 3rd or 4th and feeling like a little bit pigeonholed into taking Justin Jefferson.
I agree with that. I will say real quickly on Jefferson / segue into the next guy. I think that Jordan Addison's probably going to get suspended for something like 2, maybe 3 games because he was busted like 2 times driving like 140 miles per hour or whatever.
Driving fast.
Yeah. So he's probably going to get something for that. Maybe it's only 1 game. Maybe he doesn't get anything. Maybe I'm just wrong. But if Jordan Addison is out, then JJ McCarthy could throw as few as like 20 passes and Jefferson would still get at least 12 targets. So if by some weird collection of weird outcomes, Addison is out for whatever 1, 2, 3 games, and if McCarthy throws 35 or more passes in any of them, Jefferson is a really good bet to be the wide receiver 1 or player 1 that week.
Right. So there is that detail to keep in mind. And with that, Jordan Addison, he goes right at the start of the 6th round, pick 61. I know you've been a big proponent of his, but how does the new ADP suit your interests?
It's a tough one. I've picked Addison a few times, certainly, but I'm not doing it from a position of strength. Usually when I do, it's usually like I'm kind of crossing my fingers and hoping A, that he isn't suspended very long or at all, and B, I'm hoping that McCarthy turns out to be one of his upper range outcomes. And I'm even worried about, I guess, I'm worried that the Vikings might just be very run heavy because Hockenson is there, of course. So if Justin Jefferson is claiming every 12 of 30 targets, then weeks where they throw the ball only 25 times could fall really hard on Addison or Hockenson, but Hawkinson's cheaper and he's the tight end, so you don't care nearly as much. It is tough though, because if it's sickening to think about scenarios like this either, but if Justin Jefferson were to miss any time, Jordan Addison goes completely crazy, I think, in that case. Like, he could be something like a top 10 fantasy receiver. I actually would specifically expect that Jordan Addison would be a top 10 fantasy receiver if Justin Jefferson were not active for any stretch of time. Obviously, I'm high on Jordan Addison as a talent. I think he's really the real deal as an NFL receiver, but both of his first 2 years have kind of been carried by touchdown production, which it's vaguely encouraging in the sense that, like, yeah, I guess all else being equal, I would hope my fantasy receiver is good at scoring touchdowns. I guess that's something you don't complain about. But even if Addison is just awesome, it's very difficult to maintain that kind of touchdown rate, even if these touchdowns are somewhat informed by like the defense selling out with triple coverage against Jefferson and Addison kind of just like slipping past. That kind of stuff, even you don't want to bank on it so much. So for Addison to have like a really good outcome, he needs McCarthy to be good, and he needs to, not get suspended for too long if he gets suspended at all. And redraft, it's a little tougher. If you have Addison starting in redraft, you need those first two receivers to be really good, I think, or you need the rest of your roster to be good because Addison will not be consistent from week to week. And if you try to play it like one of those ways, like, oh, I'll just bench him when he's playing a tough pass defense. Well, Jordan Addison's rookie year, Justin Jefferson did miss some time when they were playing the 49ers, and Charvarius Ward started to shadow Jordan Addison at that point. Addison just took the torch to him. It was a big time beatdown. So I'm not convinced that Addison ever loses for talent reasons, but circumstantial reasons don't look that clear. The circumstantial forecast is not that clear. There are various things that could trip him up.
I think so too. And there's really just like this wealth of options. And I'm really not trying to be like wishy-washy about it, but like I think that there are those circumstantial elements that serve as a tiebreaker against Addison when I'm drafting a receiver at that particular part of the draft. Like Juwan Jennings, I think it is, right there. Rome Odunze goes in that range. Calvin Ridley goes just a little bit before. I'm kind of surprised.
I kind of like Odunze and Ridley more, I think. But honestly, I'd probably take Addison over Jennings. I'm just a little convinced that Jennings is a sell high kind of. I think he's a good player, but I'm sorry, he is not the wide receiver one on that team, and you can see the entertaining of that thought has kind of permeated his ADP a little bit.
Yeah, I've been more attuned to. I have like too much Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, I'm a Pearsall truther. Our boy needs to stop getting like hamstring pulls and stuff. But as long as he starts playing games, he's Ayuk's the wide receiver one when fully healthy. But I think Pearsall's pretty easily going to leave Jennings behind.
Yeah, so Jennings is a little bit tenuous there. So, but I think that's a fair marker when you're going receiver here and deciding between Addison and some of these other guys. So maybe diversifying between Ridley, Addison, and Odunze is probably the best course of action for that particular range. And Chris Godwin too, I guess, goes a little bit later. I'd probably like
Godwin, at least for floor. I mean, if I know Godwin's coming back from that injury, but I think at worst, if Godwin starts a little slow, then in the last 12, 13 games, he's going to be that 110, 115 catch pace kind of receiver. And there's no other way the Buccaneers can run their offense. So Ridley, Godwin, definitely better sources of floor. And I think Odunze is a better source of upside than Addison, mostly just because of the offense that he plays in. But you said the right word, diversification. I think with guys like these, it's a pretty important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. So but I think shopping in this aisle is a good idea this year. Just make sure that you're not like overweight on one of them and fading a bunch of the others, because I think there are good cases, good upside cases, and good floor cases for most of those receivers going in that range. Next up is Aaron Jones, who we already talked about. Let's go a little TJ Hockenson. I haven't drafted him much at all yet, if at all. I think that last week there was a dynasty question from one of our listeners who was talking about Hockenson, and I was kind of being a little bit leery about it, but admittedly, he is further removed from the knee injury that this year than he was last year, obviously. And I think just when you look at tight end, generally, he is a little bit on an island where before him, Sam Laporta goes at pick 70, Hockenson goes at pick 85, and then Travis Kelce is the next tight end to go off the board at pick 97.
Yeah, that's it's weird. I think that distribution of the pick range. I would have thought Hockenson would either be closer to Laporta or closer to Kelce than so far in between. I think it would be a mistake to try to factor in Hockenson's numbers from last year, except for the target count, which was extremely high, even with the difficulties of coming back from that gnarly injury that occurred late in the season prior. So 62 targets on 395 snaps. That's not actually sustainable. I think what that says is the Vikings were putting Hockenson on the field for route running only work. Like they're like, he's too beat up to do the blocking things. Have Oliver, have Munt do those. So when Hockenson was going on the field, there was a lot of dialed up plays for him that you can't actually prorate over a full season's workload, because he would eventually start doing snaps that aren't for targets. Like he'd start having blocking reps that he didn't take on last year. But that what I'm describing, this kind of balancing out of the blocking and the route running that comes with a full 3-down workload, that was what happened in 2023. And in 15 games that year, Hockenson caught 95 passes, so 127 targets on 756 snaps. That's an extremely high target rate. He could afford to see that target rate decrease quite a bit, and I think still come through at ADP where he's at. But the challenge with Hockenson, as I see it, the one concern with him that I think is totally reasonable, and it's reasonable if it drives you away from him, is that he's been injured basically every single year for 7 years now. So Hockenson, on the one hand, would I think be a clear ADP smash at his current price if he stayed healthy all year, or even 15 games, honestly. Even if you get 15 games out of him, I think he still pretty much smashes that. But I would have no good evidence for you as to why you should expect him to play that much.
No, so durability has obviously been, an issue for him. I have a dumb guy thought for you when it comes to McCarthy. I mean, he and Colson Loveland were great together in 23. I mean, I think that it was a Michigan offense that didn't have it. I mean, Roman Wilson got drafted and everything, but I think that Loveland proved to be like the best overall pass catcher from that group.
Yeah.
You could see a situation where McCarthy does lean on the tight end a good bit, so we could see a strong target rate there for Hockenson.
Yeah, I'm optimistic for the target rates for the price, all three of Jefferson, Hockenson, and Addison. In Addison's case, it's like the risk is greater because he's a receiver. You have higher standards out of receivers, and you don't really get any discount for it anyway. But in Hockenson's case, I really think there's pretty much no usage risk at all. By usage risk, I mean, I don't think if Hockenson disappoints anyone this year in fantasy, that it even is a remote chance due to him going long periods without targets. It's like if he's a disappointment, it's because he's not playing, is how I see it. And part of why I see it that simply is that excuse me, the Vikings usage from scrimmage and the route runners in particular is very there's some, what is the word? It's very like top heavy, and it's very narrowly channeled. That's what I was trying to think of.
Yes,
there's just those three. Even a guy like Nailor, he doesn't play very much. They prefer to go 2 tight end. They prefer that Josh Oliver play instead of Nailor. If they're going with Nailor, it's because they need to score points quickly, and they're probably in a worse spot. But Nailor, he plays sparingly, doesn't do that much when he does play. He's efficient. He was explosive and efficient last year, but he wasn't targeted that much on a per snap rate, and he didn't play that many snaps. So like Ty Felton, I'm not concerned. I'm not projecting. I don't think Ty Felton gets even like 25 targets this year if those other 3-4 stay healthy. So Hockenson is either playing and getting that usage, or he's not playing, is how I see it. And I truly do not see a third possibility.
I don't either. But do you think, and I'm glad you touched on Ty Felton and Jalen Nailor, both of those guys. So we'll finish it out here with like the end game type of options, because after McCarthy, like you said, it's a top heavy offense. No one goes between McCarthy and the end of drafts. So you have a guy like Ty Felton, a rookie out of Maryland. I love Maryland Terrapins, but I think Jalen Nailor runs ahead of him. So if you want to kind of throw a last stitch dart on one of those receivers, I think Nailor is the one that you'd want to go after.
Yeah.
And this just kind of occurred to me too, with the injury detail being what it is in TJ Hockenson's case, maybe just like 1 or 2 end of the draft shares. Any interest in Gavin Bartholomew?
No, Bartholomew might hang around for a while, but he was weird. Like a 4-year starter in college like him at Pittsburgh, then not really doing anything after he had a big freshman year, and people were like, Bartholomew, he might be an NFL guy, and then he never got better after his freshman year, despite starting all 4 of those years. Kind of strange. Maybe I'm overlooking him a little bit, but the problem for him, I think, is Josh Oliver's also going to run ahead of him. And granted, last year when Hockenson was hurt, they tried to reclassify Johnny Munt as a pass catching specialist. Like they tried to put Munt into the Hockenson role and kept Oliver in the blocking specialist role, even though Oliver's way more athletic than Munt. So maybe Bartholomew would be next up after Hockenson if Hockenson were to miss time. But for me, if we're looking for a pick in this offense in best ball after the quarterback, the 2 running backs, Addison, Jefferson, Hockenson, the next player for me would definitely be Nailor. And I do think in NFFC has a bigger, was it like 28 or 30 rounds or something, kind of best ball format. Any best ball format that goes 20 or more rounds, I definitely think Jalen Nailor is worth picking in that, because I think we have reason to believe he's an effective route runner. And at that late price, if you're wide receiver 8 or 9 or whatever, his inconsistency doesn't hurt you. And in the off chance that he does get a greater playing time number, then there's reason to suspect it'll scale up. He was always a good player at Michigan State too. He just got hurt all the time.
Right. He had in PPR scoring, he had 4 games over 10 points last year.
Yeah, he was a great pick on that whatever that NFFC 30 round thing is.
Exactly. So that's a good, kind of final summation that there's really only one-ish, truly late round dart when it comes to this Minnesota offense. Otherwise, top heavy. Thank you for talking me out of Gavin Bartholomew and saving me from another Davis Allen adventure.
Hey, I will give Davis Allen this. Like he's probably better than Bartholomew.
I got sucked in by.
I thought you were going to say Oliver,
because
I thought you were going way back in the college fantasy football days when it was like locking in Oliver every week because he was the wide receiver 1 for San Jose State.
San Jose State has had some great fantasy assets over the years. Anyone that played last year, Nick Nash was everybody's favorite. But yeah, Oliver, I've just seen him play too much at the NFL level to be convinced of his pass catching. Like I think he is like a really good blocker, but even with what he did in college, is like watching him catch a football in the NFL level is very clumsy to me. I don't know.
Oh, fair enough. But yeah, the main thing is, unless you're in a like 3 tight end league, if you have to start 3 tight ends, maybe Bartholomew can be on your late round watch list.
Yeah, your taxi squad or something. But I think with Gavin Bartholomew mentioned, I think that's a good sign that we have
destroyed Bartholomew.
We have covered everything that there is to cover with this Minnesota offense in this particular episode. So that's going to do it for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, brought to you by our friends over at Circa. And guess what, folks? If you're watching us on the live stream or on YouTube, right there at the bottom, rotowire.com, use that code YouTube15. You get 15% off any RotoWire product. That is also, of course, applicable if you're listening to us in podcast form. And check out the site. I mean, we got a nifty new navigation that went live as of Wednesday. So check that out. Get yourself familiar before the season starts. Get all your cheat sheets, all your projections, all that good stuff over here at rotowire.com and use that code YouTube15. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.